Welcome to Reformed Thinking, your shortcut to being well-informed. Today we're embarking on a fascinating deep dive. We're looking into a term that is really central to understanding human nature and our relationship with the Creator within the Hebrew Bible. We're going to unpack the Hebrew word koeso, often transliterated as nephesh. Now, for many of us, our modern understanding of nephesh is, well, it's heavily influenced by later philosophical ideas. We often translate it simply as soul. But what you're about to discover is that while soul isn't entirely wrong, it kind of only scratches the surface. Nephesh actually holds a far richer, much more complex range of meanings than modern English or even, later Greek philosophical ideas might ever suggest.
That's really why we're here today. Our mission is to unpack these multifaceted meanings of nephesh as it appears right through the Old Testament. We'll be drawing from its ancient Semitic roots, looking at its incredibly concrete uses, exploring how it expresses the full spectrum of human emotions, and then examining its deep theological significance. Our goal for you, our listener, is to gain a truly holistic and biblically grounded grasp of this vital concept. By the end of this deep dive, hopefully, you'll read the Old Testament with fresh eyes, seeing the human person in a completely integrated way.
And we're going to act as your guides through this material. We've gone through comprehensive linguistic and theological sources, carefully extracting the insights that will help you understand what's truly going on in these ancient texts. Think of this as pulling back the curtain on a word that, once you get it, it illuminates so much more of the Bible. So let's begin our exploration.
Right, so when we talk about nephesh, we're not dealing with some obscure word that barely shows up, not at all. Nephesh appears approximately 754 times throughout the Old Testament. That sheer number alone signals its foundational standing in ancient Hebrew thought. Huge number, foundational. And just to give you a sense of how pervasive it is, consider it shows up 144 times in the Psalms alone. That highlights its prominent role in expressing inner experience, devotion, even deep human suffering. It's woven into the very fabric of the biblical narrative and poetry, almost like a central thread. This high frequency should immediately tell us this word is significant. It's not just some minor lexical detail.
And its significance certainly isn't confined just to Hebrew. When we look at its linguistic lineage, we find that nephesh isn't isolated. Its basic form, napha or nafishi, has cognates across a range of ancient Semitic languages. For instance, in Ugaritic, we find pu. In Phoenician, Aramaic, and Arabic, it appears as nafs. And in Akkadian, we have napistu.
Okay.
What's really revealing is that these cognates often carry meanings tied to the throat, breath, and life. Akkadian napistu, for example, directly means both throat and life. That gives us a very clear hint at nephesh's core, meaning development.
Right, throat and life. That's interesting.
Yeah, and furthermore, we see the denominative verbal form, moon, meaning to exhale or to refresh oneself. We find this in passages like Exodus 23:12. It describes the Sabbath as a day when your ox and your donkey may rest, and the son of your female servant and the sojourner may refresh themselves. Literally, their nephesh can take a breath.
Refresh themselves. Okay. Similarly, Exodus 31:17 says that on the seventh day, God rested and was refreshed again. His nephesh exhaled, metaphorically speaking. And in 2 Samuel 16:1, King David and his people refreshed themselves after a long journey. These examples reinforce that strong connection to the act of breathing and vital restoration. So we can trace a really clear semantic progression for nephesh. Its fundamental meaning truly begins with something very concrete, a physiological act. The windpipe opened for breathing, or quite literally the throat and neck.
Right.
Think about the most primal human needs, breathing, eating, drinking. The ancient Hebrews rooted their concept of nephesh, the very essence of a person, in this raw physicality. But from this tangible physical starting point, the meaning of nephesh dramatically expands. It grows to encompass desire, breath itself, the animating quality we might associate with a soul, life in its broadest sense, and ultimately the self or the entire individual person. You can see how this progression moves from something you can physically point to towards something far more encompassing and abstract, yet still deeply rooted in embodied existence.
Right.
This isn't some ethereal concept floating around. It's profoundly grounded in what it means to be alive and embodied.
That's a great way to put it. And just to give you a clear roadmap for this deep dive, we'll unpack its meanings into several main categories. We'll look at its use for concrete body parts, then as life itself, as a living being, as the entire self or individual. Then we'll get into its role as the seat of emotions and desires, and finally, its critical theological uses. This structured approach will really highlight the polysemous nature of the term, meaning it carries this rich variety of interconnected meanings. It shows just how dynamic and comprehensive nephesh truly is in the biblical worldview.
Okay, let's start with those most literal, concrete meanings of nephesh, because they really are the foundation for everything else. First and foremost, nephesh can simply mean throat or neck. This is considered one of its basic or even original meanings. You often find it used in parallel with other physical terms like mouth, pe, or gullet, gargarteka. That kind of solidifies this understanding, showing it's part of the physical body. For instance, think of those vivid biblical expressions where water reaches up to my throat, like in Psalm 69.2. The psalmist is describing being overwhelmed by floodwaters. I sink in deep mire. The flood sweeps over me.
Very graphic.
Or in Jonah 2.6, from the belly of the great fish, Jonah cries out, "The waters closed in over me to take my life. Weeds were wrapped about my head." In both cases, the water is threatening to suffocate, to enter the throat, directly imperiling the nephesh.
Life itself is threatened via the throat.
Exactly. Or consider when someone's throat is described as dry, yavasha. That's Numbers 11.6 during the Israelites' wilderness journey. They complain about the lack of food and how their nephesh is dried away. That's a clear link to a parched throat and intense physical craving.
Right.
Similarly, when the prophet Isaiah describes the greedy in Isaiah 5.12, he says that Sheol has enlarged its nephesh and opened its mouth beyond measure. It's depicting this insatiable, gaping throat of the underworld.
Wow.
And Habakkuk 2.5 describes a proud man whose appetite is as wide as Sheol. Like death, he has never enough. Again, the throat, the appetite. These examples connect hunger and thirst directly to the physical throat. This association directly reflects its essential functions, swallowing and breathing. It's a very visceral, physical word at its core.
Building on that, while nephesh, as breath, in its literal form is, well, almost unattested directly in the Old Testament, it's strongly inferred from its verbal cognates and contexts. There is that rare explicit exception in Job 41.32 describing the fearsome Leviathan. Its breath kindles coals, and a flame comes forth from its mouth.
Okay, breath-kindling coals, that's clear.
Yeah, their nephesh clearly refers to the creature's exhalation. But the strongest evidence for this original meaning comes from that verbal form nepeš, which we mentioned earlier. It means to exhale, to recover, or to take breath.
Right, the refreshing part.
Exactly. This verb strongly implies the underlying noun's core connection to breath as the very sign of life and refreshment. Additionally, there's that intriguing phrase, "jakte hanapi" in Isaiah 3.20. It's often translated as smelling bottles or perfume boxes.
Smelling bottles.
Yes, and that further links nephesh to the idea of breath, exhalation, or scent. It suggests an object that holds or releases an aroma, which is a form of exhalation. It sort of hints at the idea of something being held in the throat or maybe something emanating from it.
So understanding these concrete physical roots, the throat as the pathway for breath, the seat of hunger and thirst, the source of life-giving inhalation, it really helps us grasp how this word later expands, how it comes to describe the very animating essence of a living being. This isn't just about anatomical parts, it's a foundational insight into how the Hebrews viewed life itself. It shows that life, for the ancient Israelite, was inextricably linked to the physical body and its most basic functions. There's no separation here, is there? It's a progression from the tangible to the vital, where the physical is understood as completely integrated with the essence of being. Okay, moving beyond physical parts, nephesh is very frequently used to denote life itself. This is a really common meaning, appearing something like 280 times in this sense. Here, nephesh represents the vital principle, that animating quality that is lost when death occurs.
So the life force, essentially.
Yes. You see this vividly illustrated in Genesis 35.18, describing Rachel's death during childbirth. As her nephesh was departing, for she died, she called his name Benoni. It speaks directly to its departure at death, the very cessation of vitality. Conversely, nephesh can be restored or revived, that's Hushiv Nephesh, as we see in Ruth 4.15. After Ruth's faithfulness, the women of Bethlehem say to Naomi, "He shall be to you a restorer of nephesh and a nourisher of your old age."
A restorer of life.
Right, giving back the joy and vitality that had been lost. It truly embodies the concept of aliveness, the very pulse and breath that signify existence.
And a really crucial theological and legal aspect associated with nephesh as life is that foundational belief that life resides in the blood.
Ah, yes, the blood.
This is a concept expressed clearly and repeatedly. Leviticus 17.1 and 14, Deuteronomy 12.23, Genesis 9.4-5, they all state, Hey tuti, hedam hu hanefesh. It means the life, the nephesh, is in the blood.
In the blood, not is the blood.
Precisely. This belief forms the direct theological basis for the strict prohibition against consuming blood throughout the Old Testament. The blood represents the life principle, and that life, the nephesh, belongs to God alone.
Okay.
So it's vital to understand that this does not mean nephesh itself is blood. Rather, life, the nephesh, is contained within the blood. Therefore, abstaining from blood is an act of acknowledging God's exclusive ownership over all life. It's a theological statement, not merely a dietary rule.
Which connects directly to the sacrificial system, right?
Absolutely. The blood containing the nephesh is poured out before God as an offering for atonement, symbolizing the giving of life back to its creator.
Building on this understanding, nephesh is also a key component in the phrase nepeš ḥayyâ. That means living being.
Living being, yes.
This phrase is used in the creation accounts to describe both animals, like in Genesis 1:20 and 24, and humans. For man, specifically in Genesis 2:7, after God forms Adam from the dust, he breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a nepeš ḥayyâ, a fully animated, living entity.
That verse is pivotal.
It really is. The human is a living nephesh, not a container for one. The very act of God breathing life makes the human a nephesh, a complete living being.
And in practical terms, nephesh is widely used in expressions related to the preservation or threat of life. It shows its direct application in daily existence and legal matters within ancient Israel. For example, we find urgent commands, like in Genesis 19:17, when Lot is told to flee for your life, himali al napika, from Sodom. It emphasizes the urgency of escaping with his very existence.
Flee for your nephesh.
Literally. Or consider 1 Samuel 20:1, where Jonathan warns David that King Saul seeks your life, because nepeš. The concept also appears in Talionic law, that principle of measure for measure. Exodus 21:23 states, life for life, nepeš. If an injury causes death, the retribution is the loss of a life.
Nephesh for nephesh.
Exactly. It's also used in phrases like to smite mortally, ḥayyâ, nepeš. In Genesis 37:21, that's when Reuben intervenes to prevent his brothers from killing Joseph, saying, let us not strike him in his nephesh. This illustrates how concrete and vital nephesh is. It serves as a direct reference to a person's physical present life.
So, connecting this back to you, our listener, understanding nephesh as life itself really helps us grasp the sacredness of life as presented in the Old Testament. It powerfully underscores the biblical statement that God is the ultimate giver and sustainer of life. That's a theme that resonates throughout Scripture and certainly grounds a reformed understanding of God's absolute sovereignty over all creation.
Our very existence, our breath, our vitality are entirely dependent upon him.
Okay, now let's transition. Let's talk about nephesh as the core of one's inner being. This is where the word often aligns with what we might commonly call soul in English. But, and this is crucial, it's important to remember that it does so without introducing those later Greek dualistic ideas. Ideas of a soul being separate from or opposed to the body.
Right, no platonic split here.
No. Here, nephesh functions as the very center of feelings, perceptions, emotions, passions. It's the unified seat of our inner life, a truly holistic concept for the individual's entire inner world. It's not a part of us, it's us experiencing internally.
And this leads directly to the aspect of longing, desire, and appetite. This meaning is closely related to nepesh's concrete meaning of throat, remember?
Ah.
Because desire is often portrayed as arising from the emptiness or yearning within the throat. We see this in expressions of physical hunger, like hungry soul, nepeš harova, in Psalm 107.9. For he satisfies the longing nephesh and fills the hungry nephesh with good things. Or Proverbs 27.7, a full nephesh loathes honey, but to a hungry nephesh every bitter thing is sweet. And also in thirst, such as Psalm 143.6, where the psalmist says, my nephesh longs for you like a parched land. Or Proverbs 25.25, like cold water to a thirsty nephesh, so is good news from a distant land.
So physical cravings.
Yes, but nephesh expands beyond mere physical cravings to general appetite and craving. These desires can sometimes carry negative connotations, like descriptions of a greedy person, bal nepeh, Proverbs 23.2, or someone avaricious, re'av nepeh, Proverbs 28.25, consumed by a desire for wealth, or even a desire for vengeance, as in Ezekiel 16.27, where God describes the Philistines' hatred of soul, their nephesh. And the Bible also observes, as Ecclesiastes 6.7 puts it, all the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the nephesh is not satisfied. This points to a kind of restless yearning that nothing earthly can fully satisfy.
And nephesh is also deeply involved as the seat of a wide range of emotional states. For instance, when we think of sorrow and distress, nephesh conveys low morale, anguish, outright desperation. We see phrases like distress of soul, our nepeš in Genesis 42.21. Joseph's brothers recall their sin against him, saying, "Truly we are guilty. We saw the distress of his nephesh when he pleaded with us, and we would not listen."
Powerful memory.
It is. Or expressions of bitterness, gloom, and discontent, as in bitter of soul, marinepa. That's in Judges 18.25, describing the despair of the Danites. Or 1 Samuel 1.10, where Hannah, deeply distressed, prayed to Yahweh and wept bitterly. Her nephesh was bitter. Job 7.11 says, "Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my nephesh. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul." The nephesh can even be described as weeping. Jeremiah 13.17, "My nephesh will weep in secret. My eyes will weep bitterly." Or being poured out in tears, like in Job 30.16 or 1 Samuel 1.15. It illustrates profound grief, but it's not all negative. While maybe less frequent, nephesh can certainly express joy, rejoicing, or gladness. It shows its capacity for positive emotions, too.
Sure.
In Psalm 35.9, the psalmist declares, "Then my nephesh will rejoice in Yahweh. It will delight in his salvation." And Isaiah 61.10 says, "My nephesh rejoices in my God, for he has clothed me with garments of salvation."
That's wonderful.
And beyond mere emotions, nephesh is the very core for expressing inclinations and aversions. Love, hate, other strong feelings. The soul can love, as in Song of Songs 1.7, "Tell me you who my nephesh loves," or 3.1-4, where the lover seeks the one her nephesh loves. Genesis 34.3 says, "His nephesh was drawn to Dinah. He loved the young woman." It can cling to something, Psalm 63.9, "My nephesh clings to you." Or delight in it, Isaiah 42.1, where God speaks of his servant, "My chosen, in whom my nephesh delights."
Of positive attachment.
Yes. And conversely, the nephesh can abhor, gal and apro, Leviticus 26.11, expressing disgust, or loathe, bala binepeš, Zechariah 11.8, indicating strong dislike or aversion. Like in Numbers 21.5, when the Israelites complained, "Our nephesh loathes this worthless food."
Right.
Or even hate, as Isaiah 1.14 powerfully states concerning God's feelings toward Israel's empty festivals. "Your new moons and your appointed feasts my nephesh hates."
And beyond desires and emotions, nephesh also touches upon volitional aspects. Our will, our intent, our purpose. It's used in phrases like, "You are willing," you should nafstrakem, in Genesis 23.8. That's when Abraham speaks to the Hittites about burying Sarah, indicating a clear act of the will, a readiness to agree.
Willingness of the nephesh.
Yes, the soul can explicitly choose, bara nepeš, Job 7.4-5, or refuse, vana nepeš, Job 6.7. This demonstrates its active role in decision-making and personal preference. Even in Job's profound suffering, his nephesh chooses or refuses.
Makes choices.
Right. Now, while sometimes associated with mental acts, nephesh is frequently used poetically or, importantly, in conjunction with levav, which is heart. In such cases, the heart typically represents intellect and deeper thought, while nephesh represents feelings and desires.
Heart and soul, as we might say.
Kind of, but we need to be careful. However, it's important to note that in Deuteronomic literature and later writings, nephesh can sometimes assimilate to levav, sharing meanings related to knowledge and will. We see this in Deuteronomy 6.5, 30.6, Proverbs 19.2, Psalm 139.12. For instance, Deuteronomy 6.5 commands, "You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart and with all your nephesh and with all your might."
Deshima. Foundational.
Absolutely. This pairing signifies a holistic, unified, total devotion of the entire person, both intellectual and emotional toward God. This holistic command to love God with our entire being resonates deeply with Reformed theology, which emphasizes that all aspects of human life, thought, and affection are to be consecrated to God.
So when we put it all together, nephesh is shown to be deeply involved in our internal personal experience. It encompasses our fundamental desires, our most intense sorrows and joys, and even our active choices. This makes it a truly unified concept for the individual's entire inner world. It leaves no part untouched by its rich meaning.
It's the unified core of our personal lived experience, deeply embodied and expressive.
Okay, building on this rich internal dimension, nephesh very often stands for the entire person, the individual, or even groups of people. It's not just a part of us, but often us in our totality.
Right.
It frequently functions as a paraphrase for personal pronouns or as a reflexive pronoun, directly emphasizing the person themselves. This usage is absolutely central for grasping Old Testament anthropology. It tells us the Hebrews didn't really dissect a person into separate components like later philosophies might.
Indeed. We see several clear examples of nephesh referring to an individual, or a collective. For an individual person, the phrase nepeš nepiyudam directly means an individual person. Like in Leviticus 24.17, whoever strikes the nephesh of a human being shall surely be put to death.
Strikes the nephesh, meaning kills the person.
Exactly, it's the whole person who can be killed. Nephesh can also denote people collectively, especially in enumerations, like 70 souls or 70 persons, Shivan Nepio in Exodus 1.5, referring to all the nephesh that came out of the loins of Jacob. Similarly, Genesis 46.15 refers to all the nephesh of his sons and his daughters. This is how the Bible counts people, emphasizing each person as a complete living entity. And with suffixes, nephesh often means myself, yourself, himself, and so on. It serves as a reflexive pronoun that emphasizes the person directly.
Like my own self.
Pretty much. For instance, in Numbers 30.512, when a woman makes a vow, it speaks of she binds herself. Literally, she binds her nephesh. And 1 Samuel 18.3 states that Jonathan loved David as he loved himself, or more accurately, as his own nephesh. It highlights the individual's direct involvement or personal preference.
Okay.
It can also refer to people acquired or purchased, specifically slaves. In Genesis 12.5, Abram is said to have acquired nephesh in Haran, meaning he gained people, servants, slaves. And Ezekiel 27.13 lists Tyre trading slaves and bronze utensils, with slaves being nephesh. It indicates their status as individuals within a household or community, even if in servitude.
This usage is truly central for understanding Old Testament anthropology. It really solidifies the idea that nephesh is not some isolated, ethereal part of a person, but rather the living, breathing, complete human being in their entirety. The person is a nephesh rather than simply having one. This aligns perfectly with a reformed understanding of humanity created in God's image, a unified being, not a fragmented one, whose entire person is involved in every aspect of life, including sin and redemption. Now, here's an aspect of nephesh that might seem contradictory at first glance, but it's actually a vital part of its wide semantic range, its use in relation to death.
The corpse connection.
Right. In specific legal and cultic contexts, nephesh can refer to a dead person or a corpse. This might appear counterintuitive given its strong association with life, but it highlights its ability to encompass the full spectrum of human existence even after vitality has ceased. It signifies the individual who was alive but is now deceased.
That's a very important distinction to make. This usage is vividly illustrated in examples related to ritual impurity. For instance, to touch a dead nephesh, neposmet, in Numbers 6.6 is explicitly stated to make someone unclean, particularly for a Nazirite who must avoid any contact with the dead.
Right, the Nazirite vow.
Exactly. This is also seen in Leviticus 21.1, where priests are commanded not to defile themselves for a dead nephesh, and 22.4, which discusses how one becomes unclean by touching a dead nephesh. This particular usage is seen as derived from its meaning of person. It essentially becomes a kind of euphemism, perhaps to avoid a more direct or stark term for a dead body.
So it's still the person, just deceased.
Precisely. It's still referring to the individual, even if that individual is no longer alive, and in this specific context is a source of ritual impurity. And it gets even more interesting when we broaden the scope to similar concepts in later Semitic languages. In Middle Aramaic, Mishnaic Hebrew, and Old South Arabian, nephesh can even mean grave monument or funerary stela.
A monument, wow.
Yeah. This development likely stems from the idea of the stele as a place into which the soul of the deceased is banished, or maybe just as a marker for the deceased person, the nephesh. While this specific meaning of grave monument isn't found directly in the Old Testament itself, it shows the term's continued association with the remembrance or physical remnants of the dead. It extends the concept of the individual's presence even beyond immediate physical life.
Interesting.
It highlights how the identity of the person, the nephesh, remains connected somehow to their physical resting place or memorial.
This truly illustrates the incredibly wide semantic range of nephesh. It's not limited to merely the living or the inner being. It even covers the state after life, though always rooted in the concept of the complete individual, whether animate or inanimate as a memorial.
It really encompasses the full continuum of human existence, from vibrant breath to the silent remembrance of death.
Okay, now let's turn our attention to nephesh's theological dimensions, how it relates to God himself. It's important to clarify right at the outset, while the direct phrase Yahweh's nephesh doesn't occur.
No, it doesn't.
Nephesh is associated with God in specific ways, primarily to express his intense emotions or actions, indicating his passionate will and divine personality.
That's a crucial distinction. While God's nephesh isn't explicitly named as such, his nephesh can be the subject of intense aversion or disgust towards his people. particularly when they disobey or engage in sinful practices. For example, in Jeremiah 6:8, God warns Judah, "Be warned, O Jerusalem, lest my nephesh turn from you."
Wow, strong language.
Very. And in Isaiah 1:14, God declares concerning Israel's Ekti rituals, "Your new moons and your appointed feast my nephesh hates." This functions to intensify God's feelings, similar to how nephesh can intensify human feelings. It shows the depth of his righteous displeasure. God's emotions aren't presented as abstract or detached. They're conveyed with the same kind of powerful, holistic expressions seen in human experience. It underscores his active involvement with his creation. On the other hand, and this is a dominant theme, God is frequently depicted as saving, delivering, and preserving human life, or nephesh, from death and distress.
The saving aspect.
Hugely important. This theme is particularly prominent throughout the Psalms, where the precariousness of human life often leads to this profound reliance on God's saving action. We see this in Psalm 116.4, where the psalmist cries out, "Ah, Yahweh, save my nephesh," and then praises God in Psalm 116.8, "For you have delivered my nephesh from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling." Other examples include 2 Samuel 4.9, where David recounts, "As Yahweh lives, who has redeemed my nephesh from all distress," and 1 Kings 1.29, where King David swears, "As Yahweh lives, who has redeemed my nephesh out of all distress." God's preserving activity limits the distress of human endangerment. It provides security and hope.
He restores the nephesh.
Exactly. God is repeatedly presented as the one who restores my soul, as in Psalm 23.3, he restores my nephesh, meaning he revives and renews the very essence of the person. Or who revives me, as Lamentations 1.16 expresses, or Ruth 4.15, which describes a restorer of nephesh. It always points back to God as the ultimate source of all renewal.
And on the flip side, the human nephesh is powerfully described as directing its hope, its desire, its yearning toward God. Think of Isaiah 26.9. "My nephesh longs for you in the night. My spirit within me seeks you earnestly."
Beautiful.
Or Psalm 33.20. "Our nephesh waits on Yahweh. He is our help and our shield." Psalm 25.1 captures this deeply personal devotion. "To you, Yahweh, I lift up my nephesh." These passages illustrate an intense human struggle and a profound dependence on God as the ultimate source of life and protection. A particularly significant phrase is that command to love God with one's whole soul, found in Deuteronomy 6.5 and 30.6. This signifies the complete and intense devotion of the entire person, often combined with heart, livav, emphasizing total surrender and dedication to the Creator.
And that really resonates with, say, the first question of the Westminster Shorter Catechism, doesn't it? About the chief end of man to glorify God and enjoy him forever. Loving God with our whole nephesh means every part of our being is directed towards him, a truly holistic and reformed pursuit. This really brings us back to an overarching theological truth. God is the sovereign sustainer of all life, and the human nephesh finds its deepest satisfaction, security, and true purpose in him alone. This perspective aligns precisely with a core tenet of Reformed understanding God's absolute sovereignty over all things and humanity's complete reliance upon his gracious provision and salvation. Our very nephesh is utterly dependent on his sustaining grace.
We have covered a lot of ground, and now we arrive at a truly crucial point of potential misunderstanding. It often arises when we hear nephesh translated simply as soul.
Yeah, this is key.
It is absolutely crucial to understand that nephesh, in the Hebrew Bible, represents the holistic individual, not a distinct, separate spiritual entity that opposes the body, as we find in later Greek philosophical traditions. The nephesh is the living, breathing, desiring, feeling, willing, individual person in their totality.
It's who you are.
Right. It's not something a person possesses as a separate part, but rather the very essence of being that person. Remember Genesis 2.7 again? Then the man became a nepeš ḥayyâ, a living being. He became nephesh. He didn't get one that was somehow distinct or detachable. This is a fundamental difference in anthropology.
This is where we see that marked contrast with Platonic dualism. Classical Greek philosophy, particularly Plato's ideas, views the psyche soul as an immortal, immaterial essence, distinct from and often considered superior to the mortal body, sometimes even trapped within it.
Trapped in a body.
That is emphatically not the Hebrew concept of nephesh. Now, you might point to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Nephesh is frequently translated there as psyche about 680 out of 754 times.
So why use psyche then?
Well, that translation didn't necessarily introduce Platonic dualism into biblical thought. What's truly fascinating is that pre-Platonic usage of psyche actually shared an astonishing correspondence to nephesh. It conveyed meanings like breath, life, seat of desire and emotions, center of religious expression, and could even stand for person or a pronoun.
So the word psyche already had those meanings.
Exactly. This indicates the Septuagint translators likely chose psyche based on its existing semantic range, which aligned well with the Hebrew concept of a unified, embodied person. They weren't necessarily importing a foreign philosophical idea that would contradict the holistic Hebrew worldview.
And this holistic view is further reinforced when we look at how nephesh relates to other Hebrew anthropological terms. Take bazar, meaning flesh or body. While nephesh is certainly distinguished from mazar, they are conceived as resting on a common substratum. Together, they signify the entire person. They are not at war with each other.
Not enemies.
No. As Job 14.22 puts it, describing a dying man, only his flesh upon him is in pain, and his nephesh upon him mourns. This isn't two separate entities in pain, but the unified person experiencing suffering in both physical and emotional dimensions. Flesh and nephesh are like two sides of the same coin, the living person. Then there's levav, the heart. In Deuteronomic literature, nephesh is often used with levav. They share meanings related to feelings, will, even mental acts. While heart typically represents intellect and deeper thought, and nephesh leans towards feelings and desires, they are frequently paired. Like in that phrase, love God with one's whole heart and whole soul. This expresses a powerful synergy, not a division. It signifies truly complete, integrated devotion.
And finally, consider ruach, meaning spirit or wind, and neshama, another term for breath. While both are related to breath, ruach often signifies a more active, dynamic, frequently divine force, or a person's vital spirit. It seems distinct from nephesh as the living, breathing entity itself.
So nephesh is the being, ruach is more the force.
Often, yes. Nephesh is the living being, the creature, while ruach can be the animating force that gives that being life or empowers it, often referring specifically to God's spirit. Neshama is primarily the breath of life God breathes into creation. This leads us to reiterate that profound difference. Nephesh is the integrated, dynamic, living person in their entirety. It constantly points to vitality, desire, emotions, and selfhood within an embodied existence, not a disembodied, immortal soul that exists apart from the physical.
Right.
This integrated understanding is also why the Reformed tradition holds to the resurrection of the body, because the human person is a complete nephesh. Redemption encompasses the whole person, body and all, not just a disembodied soul. It is the person, fully alive and fully known by God, who is redeemed.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, the key takeaway for you, our listener, is that understanding nephesh is really like gaining a new lens through which to read the Old Testament. It truly reveals a rich, holistic understanding of human existence within God's creation, far more integrated than many traditional translations might suggest. It reshapes how you see yourself, your struggles, and your relationship with God.
Indeed. And maybe something for you to consider further. Ask yourself, how does this holistic understanding of nephesh inform your view of your own being, your struggles, your desires, and ultimately your relationship with the Creator, who intimately breathed nephesh into you at the very beginning? How does it change how you might understand personal responsibility, knowing that your entire being is active in sin and righteousness?
This deeper dive should encourage you to reflect on how this integrated biblical anthropology might reshape your understanding of personal responsibility, your emotional life, and your pursuit of God. It shows that every part of you, your entire nephesh, is known, understood, and cared for by God, a God who delights in the living beings he has made.